The morning sunlight spread across the historic streets of Savannah, casting a golden hue over the oak trees draped in Spanish moss. Aisha Brooks stood before the mirror in a small room on the second floor of a white-painted wooden house, carefully pinning the last curl into her neat bun. Her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed out the crisp, white blouse she had spent 3 months' worth of tutoring money to buy. This blouse was more than just clothing. It symbolized a bigger dream, an internship at Harper & Sons, the prestigious law firm in New York. Within the next 24 hours, she would leave the peace of Savannah to face the skyscrapers and relentless pace of Manhattan. Aisha, you'll wear a hole in the floor if you keep pacing like that. The warm voice of her grandmother, Nana Grace, echoed from the doorway. She stepped inside, carrying the scent of freshly baked cookies and the calm of someone who had lived through 6 challenging decades. As the whole town called her, Nana Grace was the embodiment of quiet strength, from Bible study sessions at church to civil rights marches in the 1960s. She looked at Aisha, her deep brown eyes shining with pride and a hint of worry. Aisha turned, her gaze leaving the reflection in the mirror. "I'm scared, Grandma," she admitted softly but truthfully. "What if New York isn't meant for me? What if I'm too different?" She gestured vaguely toward herself, a 20-year-old black girl from a small town where everyone knew each other's names, where she felt safe, but also boxed in by curious stares and quiet prejudice. Nana Grace walked over, her age-worn fingers gently holding Aisha's chin, forcing her to look into her eyes. "Listen to me, Aisha Brooks. The world is full of people pretending to be something they're not. But your heart, your honest, pure heart, that's your strength, not your weakness." She smiled, carrying memories of hard days and quiet triumphs. "When I was your age, they told me I couldn't be a teacher because of my skin color. But I became one anyway. And you are living proof that dreams can break any barrier." Her words sank into Aisha like a prayer. At 20, she was an inspiring contradiction. Someone who had never been in love but believed in classic romances in the age of dating apps. This dreamer still wrote handwritten letters and collected vinyl records of Billie Holiday and Ella Fitzgerald. But she was also profoundly aware of reality. As a black girl from a modest neighborhood in Savannah, where dreams were often limited by family income, an opportunity like Harper & Sons felt like a miracle. She had worked tirelessly, earning a full scholarship, volunteering at the community library, and studying through endless nights to prove she was worthy. But New York was a different world, where she could be judged not only by her abilities, but by her skin color, voice, or how she walked. "I don't want them to think I'm naive," Aisha whispered, smoothing her cream-colored skirt. "A nervous habit. I want them to see me as Aisha, not the girl from Savannah." Nana Grace chuckled, the sound warm like Sunday morning coffee. "Naive and pure-hearted are 2 different things, my dear. You chose to wait for love. You choose to live by your values. That's wisdom, not weakness." She pointed toward the suitcase by the door, packed with simple clothes and big dreams. "New York will test you, but don't let it change who you are. Bring Savannah with you, your kindness, honesty, and love for jazz." Her words made Aisha smile. She walked over to the small table by her bed, where an old leather journal lay open. She picked up her pen, and the words flowed out like a private vow. "Dear future Aisha, today, I'm scared but excited. New York feels like an unopened book, mysterious and maybe even dangerous. Nana says the heart knows things the mind doesn't understand. I don't know what's waiting for me, but deep down, I feel something magical is about to happen. Please don't let me lose myself out there. Love, present. Aisha." She closed the journal, feeling like she had just made a promise to herself. Outside the window, the sound of cicadas buzzed like a twilight symphony. Aisha sat down on the porch swing, where she had spent hundreds of evenings listening to Nana's stories. Her suitcase was ready at the door, but her thoughts hovered between past and future. Savannah was home. The tree-lined streets, the jazz nights at the local cafe, the community where she taught kids to read every weekend. But it was also the place where she'd heard whispers. She's smart, but can she make it somewhere bigger? New York was her chance to prove them wrong. Harper & Sons didn't just choose her for her academic record. They chose her for her essay about justice and equality, about bringing opportunity to communities like hers. But when she thought about Manhattan, Aisha couldn't help but wonder. Would she be strong enough to face the stares, the questions about her background, or the suspicion that she was just a diversity pick? Nana Grace stepped onto the porch, carrying a cup of mint tea. She sat beside Aisha, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Do you remember the first time I told you about your grandfather?" she asked. "He was a white man, and this whole town whispered when we fell in love. But love doesn't care about color or prejudice. It only knows the heart. You'll find your way, Aisha, whether in Savannah or New York." Aisha nodded, a warm feeling spreading in her chest. Nana wasn't just her grandmother. She was a guiding flame who taught her that courage begins by believing in yourself. Aisha embraced her, breathing in the familiar scent of cookies and love. "I'll make you proud," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. As the sun set, Aisha stood up and looked at the home that had raised her. She had no idea that just days later, a chance encounter in an elevator would change everything. She couldn't imagine that somewhere in Manhattan, a man bearing the weight of an empire was living in loneliness, waiting for someone like her to remind him that hearts, too, have their voice. She stepped inside, closed the door, and prepared for the journey ahead. A journey not just to New York, but toward her true self. In the penthouse office on the 52nd floor of the Apex building in Manhattan, Ethan Caldwell sat behind his ebony wood desk, his sharp gaze scanning the computer screen. Numbers and financial charts from the merger with Blackwood Enterprises flashed before him, but his mind was only half engaged. Below, New York City stretched out through the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, the lights twinkling like lost stars. But to Ethan, they were nothing more than a faded backdrop, no different from the calculations he had memorized since he was 18. At 32 years old, he was the CEO of Caldwell Innovations, a tech giant specializing in artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. Still, his world was a series of long days filled with meetings, decisions, and loneliness, carefully hidden beneath the surface. Ethan swiveled in his chair, his gaze landing on the only photo on his desk, an old picture of him at 12, standing beside his father, William Caldwell. The man in the photo had stern eyes, a square jaw, and a rare smile. William had built Caldwell Innovations from a garage in Silicon Valley into a multi-billion-dollar empire. When he passed away 5 years ago, Ethan inherited the company and the burden of relentless expectations. "Caldwell doesn't dream, Ethan," his father once said, his voice low and commanding. "We build. We control." Those words had been etched into Ethan's mind like a blueprint for his life. He stood up and walked toward the window, his hands slipping into the pockets of his perfectly tailored trousers. The dark gray suit fit him like a second skin, but it couldn't hide the tension in his posture, his shoulders slightly hunched, as if carrying the weight of the world. Ethan had never loved or kissed anyone, not because of a lack of opportunity. In Manhattan, invitations were never in short supply, from women at gala events to discreet handwritten letters sent to his office. But love, to Ethan, was an uncontrollable variable, a risk with no algorithm to solve. And in his world, the risk was something to eliminate. Ethan's past was a series of forced choices. As a child, he had dreamed of becoming a pianist, spending hours in his mother's music room, where the melodies of Chopin and Debussy filled the void left by his father's absence. His mother, a music teacher, had encouraged him, but his father had seen it as a waste of time. When Ethan was 14, William forced him to give up the piano to focus on math and programming, which were worthy of a Caldwell. His mother passed away shortly after, and with her, Ethan's dreams also faded. He learned to bury his emotions, building an invisible wall between himself and the world, where only work felt safe. The merger report on his desk was proof of that control. Blackwood Enterprises, a competitor in cloud data, had proposed a $15 billion deal. However, the key condition, a marriage between Ethan and Claudia Blackwood, the chairman's daughter, unsettled him. His father had placed this clause in his will, believing a family alliance would solidify Caldwell Innovations' position against hostile takeovers. Ethan knew Claudia from college. She was intelligent, ambitious, and well-versed in the high society game, but she wasn't someone he wanted, although he wasn't sure what he wanted. Love to him was a foreign concept, like a language he had never learned. The phone rang, pulling Ethan out of his thoughts. James Harper, a longtime partner at Harper & Sons, appeared on the screen. "Ethan, the financials from Blackwood just came in. They want to speed things up. And Claudia will be at the conference in Seattle next week. Are you good?" James's voice was low, carrying the concern of a friend more than a business partner. "I'm fine," Ethan replied briefly, though his voice lacked conviction. He looked down at the desk, where a thick merger contract lay next to the photo of his father. "What do they want from me, James? Besides marrying Claudia?" James sighed on the other end of the line. "You know, Ethan, it's not just about money. You're the face of Caldwell Innovations, a single, scandal-free CEO with no weaknesses. But the media is starting to gossip. They want a story, and Claudia's perfect. Power, pedigree, and stability." Ethan clenched his fist, his nails digging into his palm. The media. He hated how they turned his life into headlines. Billionaire CEO, single, or the cold air of Caldwell. He had learned to live with it, but the thought of an arranged marriage made his stomach twist. Not because of Claudia. She was someone he could talk to, even respect. But because it reminded him that his life had never truly belonged to him. "Send the report over," Ethan said, cutting off the call before James could respond. He returned to his desk, opened his laptop, and reviewed the numbers. But his mind drifted. He thought about the lonely nights in his penthouse, where the sound of a piano once filled the air, but now only silence remained. He thought about his mother, the only person who had ever encouraged him to feel, and how she left too soon. He thought about his father, who had taught him that emotions were a weakness, and how he had lived by that philosophy, even if it left him empty. Caldwell Innovations was not just a company. It was his father's legacy, and Ethan had spent his life protecting it. The company was a leader in developing AI security, with contracts from both the government and private corporations. The merger with Blackwood would expand their market, but Ethan knew the cost: his freedom. He didn't want to marry Claudia, but didn't know what else he wanted. Love to him was a vague concept that only existed in the jazz ballads his mother used to play. He stood up and walked over to the bookshelf in the corner of the office, where a dusty vinyl record of Miles Davis sat. He didn't touch it, but the memory of those afternoons spent listening to music with his mother made his chest ache. "What will you do without music, Mom?" he had once asked. She smiled, stroking his hair. "You'll find someone who brings music into your life, Ethan, who reminds you that the heart knows how to sing." Those words now echoed in his mind, but Ethan pushed them away. He didn't have time for dreams. The board was waiting, Claudia was planning, and the merger deal was approaching. He returned to his desk, opened his email, and began drafting a message to the legal team. But deep inside, a small, long-forgotten part of him wondered if something, or someone, was waiting to break through the wall he had built. He couldn't know that, just days later, a girl from Savannah would step into the elevator of the Apex building, carrying with her the melody of jazz and a heart brave enough to see through the perfect facade he had built. That encounter would change his trajectory and teach him that sometimes the most significant risks are the ones worth taking. The morning in Manhattan had a different rhythm. Unlike the slow pace of Savannah, Aisha Brooks stood on the sidewalk in front of the Apex building, gripping her grandmother's old leather bag like an anchor amid the storm of yellow taxis and bustling pedestrians. The skyscraper glittered like a crystal mountain, reflecting the clouds drifting by so closely that she felt she could touch them. Today was her first day at Harper & Sons, and she had arrived an hour early, just as Nana Grace had said. "Being an hour early is being on time, my dear." Though carefully ironed, the cream-colored dress she wore suddenly made her feel out of place amid the sea of black suits and expensive high heels. Aisha took a deep breath, telling herself, "I can do this." She checked the map on her phone one last time and walked through the revolving door of the building, where the stream of people coming and going never ceased. The marble-clad lobby gleamed, the soft light from the chandeliers making her feel like she had entered another world. She approached the reception desk, where an elegant woman smiled professionally. "I'm Aisha Brooks, here for the internship program at Harper & Sons," she said, her voice slightly higher than usual, as if asking more than stating. 47th floor, the woman replied, signaling to a security guard named Carl, who looked like a football player. "Carl will take you to the elevator." Aisha nodded, trying to maintain her composure, even though her heart raced. The elevator doors opened quickly, empty, with mirrored walls reflecting her image countless times. She took the moment of solitude to adjust her pearl earrings, the only graduation gift from Nana Grace, and whispered a short prayer. Then, the door opened again, and he stepped in. Ethan Caldwell appeared as if he owned the building and the concept of time itself. The dark gray suit fit him perfectly, and the silver tie was knotted with the precision of a mathematician. But his eyes caught Aisha's attention, a stormy gray-blue, like the sky before a tempest, sharp but hiding an undefinable sense of loss. He glanced at her, offering a slight nod, a minimal gesture acknowledging her presence, before pressing the button for the 52nd floor. The doors closed, and the space became oppressively silent. Aisha stood still, trying not to notice his overwhelming presence. She realized she was unconsciously tapping a rhythm to an old Billie Holiday jazz song on her bag, a habit she did when anxious. Ethan remained still, but she felt he was watching her from the corner of his eye. Then, suddenly, the elevator jerked and stopped. The lights flickered twice before switching to emergency mode, casting a dim glow over the space. Ethan immediately sprang into action, pressing buttons on the control panel with urgency. No response. He pulled out his phone, checked it, and frowned. "No signal," he muttered, his voice low and sharp, as though commanding the situation to change. He turned to Aisha, finally really looking at her. "Looks like we're stuck." Aisha laughed, a clear, natural sound that even surprised her. "Sorry," she said quickly, covering her mouth. "It's just that stuck seems the mildest way to describe this." Her smile lit up the cramped space, and Ethan felt something beyond his usual control for the first time that day. An odd sense of embarrassment, "What would you call this?" he asked, his tone curious, albeit reluctant. He leaned against the mirrored wall, arms crossed as if sizing up a competitor in a boardroom. Aisha tilted her head, thinking. A moment on pause? It's like when a song stops just before the climax. She smiled, but her eyes betrayed her unease. By the way, I'm Aisha. Aisha Brooks, intern at Harper & Sons. Ethan hesitated momentarily, as if introducing himself was an unfamiliar act. He said Ethan did not mention his last name or CEO title. He didn't need to. His presence spoke for itself. But the way Aisha looked at him, with no fear or reverence, made him feel as though she saw through him, even if just for a moment. The emergency phone in the elevator crackled, and a tiny voice echoed. "We'll fix it in 15 minutes. Please remain calm." Ethan nodded, though no one could see, and loosened his tie slightly, a small gesture that felt like surrender to him. "You're new here," he remarked, his gaze landing on her pearl earrings. "Not many people show up this early." Aisha shrugged, trying to mask her anxiety. "My grandmother says being early is a sign of respect. And I don't want them to think I'm not worthy." She paused, realizing she had said something too honest. In Savannah, she had gotten used to trying twice as hard to prove herself, especially being the only black girl in many classrooms. New York, she feared, would be even harsher. Ethan raised an eyebrow, not so much surprised as intrigued. "Who are they?" he asked, his voice soft but sharp, as though he could see the doubts swirling in her head. Aisha pursed her lips, considering. "The people who think a girl from Savannah doesn't belong here. The ones who will see my skin before they see my credentials." She said it slowly, as if testing how he would react. In Savannah, she had learned to speak her truth. But she wasn't sure if honesty would be welcomed here. Ethan didn't respond immediately. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and at that moment, Aisha felt as though he was no longer the powerful man in the expensive suit, but someone trying to understand something beyond his control. "They're wrong," he finally said, his voice low but certain. "If you're here, you belong." His words took Aisha by surprise. She smiled a slight but genuine smile. "Thank you," she said. And for the first time, she felt a slight relief in the suffocating space of the elevator. She didn't know that those words, for Ethan, were a rare revelation, a moment where he allowed his emotions to override his logic. The elevator shuddered, the lights flickered back on, and the doors opened at the 47th floor. Aisha stepped out, turning back to look at Ethan. "Have a good day, Ethan," she said, her voice carrying a hint of mischief. He nodded, his lips curling slightly into an unformed smile. "You too, Aisha." As the elevator doors closed, Aisha felt her heart race faster than usual. She couldn't explain why, but that brief encounter left her with a strange feeling, like she had just touched a melody she had never heard. On the 52nd floor, Ethan stood alone in the elevator, his fingers unconsciously brushing the tie he had just loosened. Her name, Aisha, echoed in his mind, and for the first time in many years, he wondered if there was something beyond numbers and contracts that deserved his attention. Neither knew that this suspended moment was just the beginning, that the elevator stop wasn't just an accident but fate, pulling two hearts that had never touched into a journey that would change everything. 3 days after the elevator encounter, Ethan Caldwell sat in his penthouse office on the 52nd floor of the Apex building, the light from his computer screen casting a glow on his face. In front of him was the latest financial report on the merger with Blackwood Enterprises, but his mind wasn't on it. Her name, Aisha Brooks, echoed in his head like a haunting and unforgettable jazz melody he had heard in childhood. He didn't understand why such a brief conversation, not even 10 minutes long, had distracted him. "Ethan," who always controlled everything from billion-dollar contracts to his minute-by-minute schedule, now found himself distracted by an intern from Savannah. He stood up and walked over to the window, looking down at the bustling Manhattan below. This city was his playground, where he had built his reputation as a sharp CEO, never allowing emotions to interfere with his work. But with her genuine smile and straightforward words about prejudice, Aisha had shaken the wall he had built since he was 14, when his father forced him to give up piano to become a faithful Caldwell. He remembered her gaze in the elevator, unafraid, unbowed, curious, and honest. She had looked at him like a human being, not a title. Ethan returned to his desk, opened his laptop, and typed her name into the Apex building's internal system. A profile appeared. Aisha Brooks, 20 years old, is an intern at Harper & Sons on the 47th floor. He skimmed through the details. Full scholarship at the University of Georgia, dual major in business administration and English literature, volunteer work at the Savannah Community Library, and a prize-winning essay on social justice. He stopped at the note about her volunteer work. She had created a reading program for children in a disadvantaged neighborhood where many kids didn't have books to read. Ethan felt an unexpected sense of respect. She wasn't just smart. She had heart, something he had long learned to overlook. He closed the file, but the image of Aisha stayed in his mind. He thought about how she tapped the rhythm of a jazz song on her bag and spoke about prejudice with a blunt honesty that made him reflect. In Ethan's world, everyone wore masks. Colleagues, partners, even Claudia Blackwood, who was about to become his wife according to the merger agreement. But Aisha had no mask. She was a breath of fresh air that fascinated and terrified him. The phone on his desk rang, pulling Ethan from his thoughts. He hit the speakerphone button. Mr. Harper was calling. Sir, and his assistant's voice rang out. Ethan nodded, though no one could see, and picked up the phone. James Harper, a longtime partner at Harper & Sons, was one of the few people he considered a friend, although their friendship mostly revolved around work. Ethan, the report from Blackwood is fine, but Claudia wants to meet with you before the Seattle conference, James said, his voice low. She's pushing the marriage clause. Are you really okay with this? Ethan clenched his hand around the pen on the desk. I'll handle Claudia, he replied, his voice colder than he intended. But I was hoping you could help with something else, James. One of your interns, Aisha Brooks. I want her to move to be my assistant. There was silence on the other end of the line. Aisha Brooks? James repeated, his voice filled with doubt. She's an intern, Ethan, and has no experience with executive support. And frankly, your assistant turnover rate has become legendary. What do you want from her? Ethan didn't respond immediately. He wasn't sure what he wanted, only that he couldn't let Aisha disappear from his sight. She's clever, organized, and different, he finally said, his voice softer. I need someone like her in the office. James sighed. Different, huh? Ethan, I've known you since college. You don't do anything without a reason. What's going on here? Are you attracted to her? Ethan frowned, feeling a nerve being touched that he didn't want to acknowledge. He said this was a business decision, but his words lacked conviction, even to himself. I'll double your budget on the internship program and ensure she keeps her internship credit. Just make it happen, James. There was another pause, and then James spoke, his voice carrying a note of caution. All right, I'll arrange it, but be careful, Ethan. Hiring someone because of personal feelings is rarely a good idea, especially with a girl like Aisha. She doesn't belong in your world, and I'm not saying that out of malice. Ethan hung up the phone, unwilling to hear more. He knew James was right. Aisha came from Savannah, a world of tree-lined streets and close-knit communities, where she taught children to read and believed in justice. And he lived in Manhattan, where every relationship was a transaction, and love was a concept he had never dared touch. But that difference made him unable to stop thinking about her. She was a puzzle he wanted to solve, even though he had never been good at solving puzzles involving the heart. He reopened Aisha's profile, his gaze lingering on the attached photo. A bright smile, warm brown eyes, and neatly braided curly hair. He thought about how she had said, "They're wrong in the elevator," as if she were challenging the whole world. He wondered if she knew that, in that moment, she had challenged his entire world. The intercom on his desk buzzed. "Mr. Caldwell, the board, is waiting in conference room A," and his assistant's voice is called out. Ethan glanced at the clock. The merger strategy meeting, where he would face questions about Claudia and the marriage clause. He stood up, adjusting his tie, but the gesture didn't carry the usual confidence this time. He felt a new unease, as if he were standing at a crossroads he had never predicted. "Cancel the meeting," he said into the intercom, his voice decisive, but tinged with uncertainty. "Reschedule for tomorrow. And call Harper back. Tell him to start the paperwork to transfer Aisha Brooks today." He sat down, his hand unconsciously touching the photo of his father on the desk. Caldwells don't dream, his father, William, had once said. But for the first time in his life, Ethan wondered if his father had been wrong. Was there a world beyond numbers and contracts, where a girl from Savannah could teach him something about living, not just existing? He didn't know that this decision would pull him and Aisha into a high-risk journey, where both would have to face the board and the media and the deep fears in their hearts. But at this moment, all Ethan knew was that he wanted Aisha nearby, not as an assistant, but as someone who could bring music back into his life. Aisha Brooks stood before the express elevator doors of the Apex building, her heart pounding in her chest. Today was her first day working at Caldwell Innovations, not as an intern at Harper & Sons, but as the personal assistant to Ethan Caldwell, CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tech empire. She still didn't understand why he had chosen her, a 20-year-old girl from Savannah with no experience in executive support. James Harper, the internship program director, had called her into his office yesterday afternoon, delivering the news with a mix of surprise and concern. "Big opportunity, Aisha," he had said, "but it's a big challenge. Be careful." She adjusted her simple black dress, her curly hair woven into a neat crown, and put on the pearl earrings from Nana Grace. Though out of place in the sleek Manhattan setting, the old leather bag from her grandmother was a reminder of where she came from. When the elevator doors opened, Aisha stepped inside, taking a deep breath to calm herself. But when the doors opened on the 52nd floor, she felt like she had entered a completely foreign world. The hallway floor was lined with white marble, the walls adorned with abstract paintings worth millions, and the silence was so profound she could hear her heels clicking on the floor. A security guard, different from Carl on the 47th floor, handed her an access card with a shiny gold stripe. "Access to the executive floor," he said, pointing to the card. "Mr. Caldwell's orders." Aisha gripped the card tightly, feeling it weighed more than it did, as if it carried expectations she wasn't ready to face. Her desk was right outside Ethan's office, a mahogany island in the vast space. She placed her bag down, scanning the room to familiarize herself with her new environment. In their expensive suits, the other employees moved with the confidence of people who belonged here. A few curious glances were cast her way, accompanied by discreet whispers. "She's the new assistant to Caldwell?" a voice called from the break room. "From Savannah," another voice replied, lowering its tone. "Probably a diversity hire." The words hit Aisha like a punch to the chest. She looked down, pretending to organize some paperwork, but her hands trembled slightly. In Savannah, she had grown used to the skeptical looks, the insinuating questions about whether she deserved her scholarship. But here, in the heart of Manhattan's power center, That skepticism felt sharper, as if it were a reminder that she was an outsider, a black girl from a small town stepping into a world of elite white people. She sat down, opened her laptop, and began reading the onboarding materials HR had sent her. Ethan's schedule was packed: board meetings, calls with partners in Tokyo, and preparations for a tech conference in Seattle. She wondered how one person could handle all of this and how she could keep up. But before she could worry further, a girl with bright blue-dyed hair walked over, her friendly smile easing the tense atmosphere. "I'm Maya Chen," the girl said, extending her hand. "Legal intern, 50th floor. I heard you're the new Caldwell assistant, so I wanted to introduce myself." Aisha shook her hand, grateful for Maya's friendliness. "Aisha Brooks," she replied. "And, yeah, I'm still trying to figure out what's happening." Maya laughed, sitting on the edge of a desk. "Trust me, no one knows what's going on here. Caldwell Innovations is a machine, and Ethan Caldwell is the brain. But you got chosen, which means you have something special. Don't let the gossip get to you." She tilted her head, her sharp gaze piercing. "I heard similar things when I started. The Asian girl probably picked for the quota. But I'm still here, and you will be too." Maya's words reassured Aisha, but also sparked a question she hadn't dared face. Did she belong here? In Savannah, she knew who she was: a jazz lover, a volunteer teacher, Nana Grace's granddaughter. But in Manhattan, she feared she would have to change, to hide part of herself to fit in. She thought about Nana, about the story her grandmother had told on the porch. Her love for Grandpa, a white man, had to overcome judgmental stares and nasty whispers. "I won't let them change me," she whispered to herself, clutching the pearl earrings as a reminder. The door to Ethan's office opened, and he stepped into the hallway. Aisha stood up, her heart racing. He wore a navy blue suit today, with a light gray tie, and his eyes, like in the elevator, were sharp but elusive. "Ms. Brooks," he said, his voice low but not cold. "You're early." "Yes, sir," she replied, trying to keep her voice calm. "I wanted to familiarize myself with the work." She realized that Maya had disappeared, leaving her alone with Ethan. He nodded, his gaze lingering on her momentarily longer than necessary, as if assessing something. "Good," he said. "Follow me, and I'll walk you through your duties." He turned toward his office, and Aisha hurriedly grabbed her laptop, following him. Ethan's office was minimalist but powerful: an ebony wood desk, black leather chairs, and a window that offered a panoramic view of Manhattan. The only personal touch was a small photo frame on the desk. Him and an older man, presumably his father. Aisha tried not to stare for too long, focusing on Ethan instead. He said your duties will include managing schedules, handling correspondence, taking notes in important meetings, and handing her a tablet. The schedule is packed. Those before you found it challenging. He looked at her as if testing her. "Do you think you can keep up?" Aisha breathed, recalling Nana Grace's words. "When they doubt you, prove them with action." She straightened, meeting his gaze. "I'll do my best, Mr. Caldwell. And if I don't know something, I'll learn." A flicker of surprise passed through Ethan's eyes, and the corner of his mouth lifted slightly, almost a smile. "Call me Ethan," he said, his tone lighter. "We'll be working together a lot." He pointed to the tablet. "Start by rearranging next week's meeting schedule. I want 30 minutes free every morning to review reports." Aisha nodded, sitting at the small desk in the corner of the office and starting her work. But as her fingers moved over the screen, she felt Ethan's gaze. He stood by the window, pretending to look at his phone, but she knew he was watching. She wondered if he saw her like the others, a diversity hire, or if he genuinely believed she deserved to be here, as he had said in the elevator. She opened the schedule, and the dense blocks of color overwhelmed her. But she didn't let herself hesitate. She began to organize, unconsciously humming an old jazz tune, Summertime by Ella Fitzgerald. Her voice was soft, but in the quiet space, it was enough for Ethan to turn back. He didn't say anything. He just stood there listening. At that moment, Aisha felt like she was bringing a piece of Savannah to Manhattan. She didn't know that Ethan, who had never let emotions interfere with his work, was feeling a strange disquiet. The melody reminded him of his mother, of the days when piano was still his dream, and with her sincerity and quiet strength, Aisha was becoming an unpredictable variable he couldn't control, but didn't want to eliminate. 2 weeks had passed since Aisha Brooks started working as Ethan Caldwell's assistant at Caldwell Innovations, and she had begun to adjust to the fast pace of the 52nd floor. Every day was a series of urgent emails, packed schedules, and meetings she took notes on at lightning speed. But amid the chaos of the tech world, she found small moments that made her feel like she wasn't completely lost, and most of those moments involved Ethan. This morning, Aisha arrived early, bringing a cup of self-brewed coffee, not the expensive kind from the $1,000 coffee machine in Ethan's private kitchen, but Nana Grace's recipe, strong, with a hint of cinnamon for warmth. She placed the cup on Ethan's desk, right next to the picture of his father, and began organizing today's schedule. Ethan was already there, standing by the window, gazing out at Manhattan with a distant look. His dark navy suit was perfectly tailored, but his tie was slightly askew, a rare sign of distraction. "You're early," he said without turning, but his voice carried a warmth she had started to recognize was meant for her. "Habit," Aisha replied, smiling lightly. "My grandmother always said being early is a way to control your day." She sat down at the small desk in the corner of the office and opened the tablet, but her eyes unconsciously drifted toward Ethan. She noticed he often stood there, looking at the city as if searching for something beyond the skyscrapers. Ethan turned around, took the coffee cup, and took a sip. His eyes brightened, though he tried to hide it. "What did you do to this?" he asked, his tone curious. "It tastes different." Aisha laughed, feeling a little more confident. "My grandmother's secret. A little cinnamon, a little love. She always said coffee isn't just for drinking, but to remind us that the new day is worth appreciating." She paused, worried she had said too much. In Savannah, stories like this were normal, but she wasn't sure if they would be seen as naive. But Ethan didn't laugh it off. He looked at her, his gray-blue eyes softening. "Sitting at the desk," he said, "your grandmother sounds like a special person. Tell me more about her." Aisha hesitated, then began. "Nana Grace was the heart of my family. She was a teacher, and she fought through days when black people like her were turned away just because of their skin color. She and my grandfather, he was white, loved each other despite the whispers. She taught me that love and kindness are the ways to change the world, even if just a little at a time." She smiled, remembering Sunday mornings in her grandmother's kitchen, where the scent of cookies and the sounds of jazz filled the air. Ethan listened, still holding the coffee cup as if her story was valuable. "You're lucky," he said, his voice low, "to have someone teach you about real things." He paused as if contemplating whether to share something. "My mother loved music too. She played piano, and I wanted to be like her. But my father—" He stopped, his gaze fixed on the picture of his father on the desk. He said that wasn't something for a Caldwell. Aisha felt an unexpected connection. She leaned forward, her voice gentle. "Did you play the piano? What kind of music?" Ethan smiled a rare smile that softened his sharp features. Mostly Chopin. But my mother liked jazz more. Miles Davis and Ella Fitzgerald. I stopped when I was young, but sometimes I still listen. He looked at her as if revealing a secret he had never shared with anyone. She nodded, her heart beating faster. I love jazz too. In Savannah, I used to go to a small cafe where they played vinyl all night. It was like a safe place, where I could just be myself. She paused, realizing she was sharing too much. But Ethan's gaze wasn't judgmental. Instead, he looked at her as if he were trying to understand something new. That evening, when the executive floor was empty, Aisha stayed late to finish a report Ethan needed for a meeting the next morning. The office was quiet, the only sound being the clicking of keys and the soft glow from the desk lamp. She hadn't realized she was humming My Funny Valentine by Ella Fitzgerald until she heard a strange piano melody, not from speakers, but from an on-screen virtual keyboard on Ethan's tablet. She looked up to see him standing by the door, his fingers gliding over the screen, playing the notes perfectly in tune with the song she was humming. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice mixed with surprise and delight. Ethan stopped, his gaze flustered. "I just wanted to see if I still remembered." He put the tablet down as if caught. "You sing beautifully." Aisha felt her cheeks warm. "It's just a habit when I'm working late. I didn't mean to disturb you." "Not disturbing," he said quickly, then walked over to her desk. "It reminds me of my mother. She used to sing while working." He sat closer than usual on the edge of her desk, and Aisha felt his presence. Not overwhelming, but warm, intimate. But that moment also made Aisha face a deep fear. She looked at him, a white man, a billionaire, living in a world she had only just begun to touch. Their differences weren't just class or race, but how they saw the world. Ethan lived in numbers and power. She lived in melodies and dreams. Could she belong here without losing herself? Would he see her, or only an idealized image of her? "Have you ever felt like you didn't belong somewhere?" she asked, her voice soft but sincere. "Like everyone only sees one part of you, but not the whole." Ethan looked at her, his eyes deep. "Every day," he said, his voice low enough that she had to strain to hear. "People see the CEO of Caldwell Innovations, not me." He paused as if surprised by his own words. "But you, Aisha, always seem to be yourself. How do you do that?" She smiled faintly. "I don't know if I am. Here, I feel I must constantly prove that I'm not a diversity hire, but deserve it. But sometimes, I'm afraid I'll have to change to fit in." Ethan leaned forward, his gaze serious. "Don't change," he said, his voice firm. "This world has enough fakes. You are real." He paused as if realizing he had gone too far. "I mean, you do your job well." Aisha smiled, feeling the tension melt away. "Thank you, Ethan. I'll try." She stood up, gathering her things. "I should get going. Tomorrow's a long day." He nodded, but his eyes lingered on her as she left the office. When the door closed behind her, Aisha felt a swirl in her chest, a connection with Ethan she wasn't ready to name. She didn't know that he, standing alone in the office, was looking at the coffee cup she had left behind, his fingers unconsciously tracing the edge, as if trying to hold on to something of her. Neither knew that these small moments, a cup of coffee, a jazz melody, a sincere question, were building a bridge between their two worlds that would soon challenge them with risks they had never imagined. Aisha Brooks walked into the 52nd floor of the Apex building with a newfound sense of confidence. After 3 weeks working as Ethan Caldwell's assistant, she had begun to grasp the rhythm of Caldwell Innovations. The endless meetings, urgent emails, and the curious glances from her colleagues. But what surprised her the most were the small moments with Ethan. The brief stories about music, his rare smiles, and how he seemed to listen when she spoke. She didn't dare call it anything, but she felt like she was getting closer to something dangerous and extraordinary every day. She set her bag on her desk and opened her tablet to check Ethan's schedule. Today was an important meeting with Blackwood Enterprises, the partner in the $15 billion merger. Aisha had overheard some details about the deal. It would expand Caldwell Innovations' market share in cloud data, but it also came with pressure from the board. When the elevator doors opened, she arranged the necessary documents, absent-mindedly humming an old jazz tune, Blue and Green, by Miles Davis. A woman stepped out, bringing with her the presence of a cold wind. Claudia Blackwood, the daughter of the chairman of Blackwood Enterprises, is tall and elegant, with shimmering blonde hair and piercing green eyes. Her form-fitting black dress and high heels screamed power, but when it met Aisha's eyes, her smile was calculated. "You're Ethan's new assistant, right?" Claudia said, her voice smooth but with a sharp edge. Aisha. Aisha stood up straight and nodded. "Yes, Aisha Brooks. It's a pleasure to meet you, Ms. Blackwood." She extended her hand, but Claudia glanced at it briefly before smiling and walking past, as if the gesture wasn't worth responding to. "Where's Ethan?" Claudia asked, looking around the hallway as if she owned the place. "We need to talk before the meeting. He's on a call with the Tokyo office," Aisha replied calmly, though her heart raced faster. "He'll be out soon. Would you like me to bring anything into the meeting room?" Claudia turned back, her gaze assessing Aisha from head to toe. "No need," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "But a piece of advice, Aisha. Don't get too attached to this role. Ethan tends to, go through assistants quickly. And his world isn't easy for people like you." She emphasized words like you, and Aisha felt the words like a dagger, referring to her job, skin color, and background. Before Aisha could respond, the door to Ethan's office opened. He stepped out of a navy suit, his sharp eyes softening when they landed on Aisha. "Aisha, have you prepared the documents?" he asked, then paused when he saw Claudia. "Claudia, you're early." "I'm always early, Ethan," Claudia said, her voice sweeter than before. She stepped forward, placing a hand on his arm with a familiarity that surprised Aisha. "We need to talk privately about the merger and other terms." Ethan nodded, his gaze briefly flicking to Aisha. Aisha came into the meeting room in 10 minutes with the documents. "And bring coffee, if you don't mind." He led Claudia into the office, closing the door behind them, leaving Aisha with a discomfort she didn't want to admit. Aisha made the coffee in the break room, trying to push Claudia's words out of her mind. Maya Chen, her fellow intern, appeared with a stack of documents. "I saw Claudia Blackwood," Maya said, raising an eyebrow. "She's the living rumor of Manhattan. I hear she and Ethan have a history." Aisha paused, turning around. "What history?" She tried to keep her voice neutral, but her curiosity was clear. Maya shrugged. "They went to college together, and their families have wanted them to be paired for a long time. This merger has a weird clause, a marriage between Ethan and Claudia to solidify the alliance. I heard it from legal. Odd, right? Who does that in the 21st century? Aisha felt a knot form in her stomach. Marriage? She thought about Ethan, his gaze when he heard her sing, the way he talked about his mother. Was it all just kindness from a boss? Or had she imagined something that wasn't there? She thought about Claudia, with her perfect appearance and the confidence of someone born into power. Compared to her, Aisha felt like a small-town girl, though she hated herself for thinking that. She brought the coffee and documents into the meeting room, where Ethan and Claudia sat across from each other. The atmosphere was tense, as if they had been debating. Aisha set the tray down, trying not to notice the triumphant look in Claudia's eyes. "Thank you, Aisha," Ethan said, his voice light but not meeting her gaze. "You can go." Aisha nodded, leaving the room, but as she closed the door, she heard Claudia's voice, clear as day. "Ethan, your father wants this. The marriage isn't just a contract. It's a legacy. That girl, she doesn't belong in this world. You know that." She stood outside the door, her hands clenched, feeling like the floor was collapsing beneath her. She didn't want to hear more, but Claudia's words echoed. She returned to her desk and opened her laptop but couldn't focus. She thought about Nana Grace and her grandmother's words on the porch. "When they try to make you small, stand taller, my dear." But right now, she didn't know how to stand taller when Ethan's whole world seemed to belong to Claudia. In the office, Ethan looked at Claudia, his hands clenched under the table. "Leave Aisha out of this," he said, his voice low but sharp. "She does her job well, and I don't need you judging her." Claudia smiled, but her eyes were cold. "I'm not judging, Ethan. I'm just reminding you of reality. This merger needs stability, and the board won't accept risks. No matter how smart, a Savannah assistant isn't the story the media wants to hear." "I am." She stood up, smoothing her dress. "Think carefully. The Seattle conference is an opportunity to announce everything, the merger and us." When Claudia left, Ethan sat back, staring out the window. He thought about Aisha, the jazz melody she sang, the coffee she made, and how she made him feel like he wasn't just a CEO. But Claudia wasn't wrong. His world was full of unwritten rules, and Aisha, with her sincerity and humble origins, was an unknown variable he didn't know how to protect. He wondered if he had the right to pull her into this world, where she might be hurt just for being herself. Aisha opened the notes app on her phone at her desk, writing a short line. "Today, I feel like I don't belong here, but I won't give up. Nana said I'm stronger than I think and want to believe her." She closed the app, stood up, and returned to work, determined to prove she wasn't just a girl from Savannah. But deep inside, she wondered if her heart was leading her somewhere that her reason couldn't follow. Aisha Brooks sat in her small Brooklyn apartment, the streetlights spilling through the window, casting faint streaks of light on the wooden floor. The clock read nearly 10 p.m., but she felt drained after a long day at Caldwell Innovations. Claudia Blackwood's words still echoed. "His world isn't easy for people like you." Those words, sharp as a blade, targeted not only her role as an assistant, but also her skin color, origins, and everything that made her different from Ethan Caldwell. She opened her phone and dialed Nana Grace's number, needing a familiar voice to push away the feeling of being lost. "Aisha, are you okay?" Nana's voice came through from Savannah, warmly like a hug over the phone. "It's late, and you're not the type to call to chat." Aisha smiled, though tears were on the verge of spilling. I'm not sure, Grandma. I think I'm doing well here. But today, someone said things that made me feel like I don't belong in this world." She recounted her encounter with Claudia, the marriage clause in the merger deal, and the smallness she felt standing in Ethan's powerful world. "I'm afraid I'll lose myself, Grandma. Or worse, I'm worried I'm letting my heart lead me to a place I don't belong." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Nana spoke, her voice steady but gentle. "Listen to me, Aisha. When I fell in love with your grandfather, the whole town of Savannah thought we were crazy. A black girl and a white boy. In the 60s. They said we couldn't make it. But we did, because love doesn't care about what others think. It only asks one thing. What is your heart saying?" Aisha clutched the phone, thinking about Ethan, his gaze when she spoke about Nana, how he played the virtual piano in response to her song. "I don't know, Grandma," she admitted. "He's different from what I imagined. He listens, really listens, but he's a billionaire, a white man, living in a world I've only just touched. I'm afraid I'm dreaming an impossible dream." "You're not dreaming, Aisha," Nana said. "You're living. And living means sometimes taking risks. Give it a chance if your heart says this guy is worth understanding. But don't forget, you're Aisha Brooks, and you carry the strength of your ancestors. Don't let anyone make you feel small." Nana's words were like a fire warming Aisha's chest. She thanked her, promised to call back soon, and hung up. She opened her notes app and wrote, "Today, I feel like I'm standing at a crossroads. But Nana is right. I'm stronger than I think. I won't run away, but I don't know if I dare move forward." Meanwhile, on the 52nd floor of the Apex building, Ethan Caldwell still sat in his office, the desk lamp the only light in the dim room. In front of him was the merger report with Blackwood Enterprises, but he couldn't focus. His conversation with Claudia earlier that morning made him angry, not just because she mentioned his father's will, but because she spoke about Aisha as if she didn't belong because she was from Savannah. He thought about Aisha, her jazz voice, the smile lit up the room, and how she made him feel like he wasn't just a CEO. Ethan stood up and walked to the bookshelf where a dusty Miles Davis vinyl record lay. He touched it, remembering when his mother played piano and sang, teaching him that emotions weren't weaknesses. But his father, William Caldwell, had a different view. "Emotions make us lose control, Ethan. A Caldwell must always be in control." Those words shaped him, building a wall between his heart and the world. But somehow, Aisha was beginning to crack that wall. He picked up the phone and dialed James Harper, his longtime friend and partner at Harper & Sons. "James, I need to talk," Ethan said when James answered, his voice low and tense. James replied that "You're calling this late, so it's not about the financials," his tone slightly teasing. "What's going on? Claudia, or your new assistant?" Ethan gripped the phone tightly, not liking how James referred to Aisha as his new assistant. "Both," he admitted. "Claudia mentioned the marriage clause today. She said it's what my father wanted. It's my legacy. But I don't like it, James. Not with Claudia." James sighed. "I know you don't want it, but you know what the board thinks. A marriage to Claudia would stabilize the stock price and prevent hostile takeovers. And the media loves the story. The billionaire CEO and the perfect heiress. But Aisha..." James paused. "She's a risk, Ethan. Not because she's not good enough. She's clever, organized, and has a heart. But she doesn't belong in your world. The media tore her apart, and you know that." Ethan stood up, walking to the window, looking down at Manhattan. He thought about Aisha, how she hummed jazz in the office, and how she spoke so candidly about prejudice. He knew James was right. His world was full of unwritten rules, and with her sincerity and humble background, Aisha would be a target for criticism. But the thought of letting her go made his chest ache, like losing something he had never had. Ethan said, "I don't want her to change," his voice low. "She makes me want to be myself, not just the person my father wanted me to be. But I don't know how to protect her from this world." James was silent momentarily, then spoke. "Ethan, I've never heard you talk about anyone like this. If she's that important to you, find a way. But remember, you're not just fighting with Claudia or the board. You're fighting the whole system, the media, the expectations, and the prejudices Aisha faces every day because of her skin color." Ethan nodded, though James couldn't see. I know, he said, but for the first time, I wanted to do something that was not in my father's plan. He hung up, staring out at the city. He thought about his mother, the jazz songs she used to sing, and Aisha, who seemed to carry a piece of those melodies with her. He didn't know how to move forward, but he knew one thing. He didn't want to lose her. In Brooklyn, Aisha stood up, opened the window, and let the city noise flood. She thought about Ethan, the look in his eyes when she sang, and how he made her feel seen. But she also thought about Claudia, about the world Ethan belonged to, where she might always be an outsider. She gripped Nana's pearl earrings, telling herself she wouldn't give up, not on the job, not on herself, and perhaps not on the feelings growing inside her. Caldwell Innovations' private jet glided through the clouds, leaving New York behind as it headed toward Seattle. Aisha Brooks sat by the window, watching Mount Rainier sparkle in the rare sunlight, feeling like she was in a dream. This was her first time on a private jet, and the luxury of it, the soft leather seats, the quiet space, and even a personal attendant, made her feel out of place. She wore a simple green dress, and the pearl earrings from Nana Grace were the only comfort in this foreign setting. Across from her, Ethan Caldwell was reading through conference materials, but his tie was slightly off-center, a small sign of the comfort she was beginning to notice. "Do you take pictures of everything?" Ethan asked, his tone teasing when he saw her lifting her phone to snap a photo of the scenery outside. Aisha smiled, her cheeks slightly flushed. "I promised my grandmother I'd capture everything," she said. "Aisha, you have to show me what the world outside looks like." She's never left Savannah. She looked out the window, thinking about Nana Grace and the stories she told about overcoming prejudice. "And I want to remember that I'm here." Ethan nodded, his gaze softening. "I get it. My mother also liked to capture everything. In music, not pictures. She used to say every note was a memory." He paused, as if surprised with himself for sharing that. Aisha tilted her head, curious. "You've mentioned your mother a few times. She must have been exceptional." Ethan looked down at his materials, but his hand stilled. "She was the only one who made me feel not like a Caldwell, but she passed away when I was young, and after that, it was just my father and his expectations." He smiled sadly. "I've never talked about this with anyone." Aisha felt a deeper connection. "I lost my father when I was young too," she said softly. "He loved jazz, and he taught me to listen to Billie Holiday. Every time I sing, I feel like he's still there, just a little bit." She paused, worried she'd gone too far, but Ethan's gaze encouraged her to continue. Ethan's phone buzzed as the plane landed at a private hangar in Seattle. He checked the message, and his face darkened. "Claudia's here early," he said, his voice tense. "She wasn't supposed to arrive until tomorrow." Aisha felt her stomach tighten. With her cold smile and sharp insinuations, Claudia Blackwood reminded her of the distance between her and Ethan. She tried to keep her voice calm. "She's here for the conference?" Ethan nodded, but his gaze avoided hers. "Definitely, and maybe to remind me about the marriage clause." He looked at her, his eyes full of conflict. "Aisha, I want you to know I don't want that. But the pressure from the board, it isn't very easy." She nodded, though her heart felt heavy. "I understand, Ethan. You have responsibilities bigger than I can imagine." But deep down, she wondered if she was fooling herself, thinking she could belong in his world. The limousine took them to the Olympic Hotel, a luxurious building with an Art Deco style and views of Elliott Bay. In the lobby, the hotel manager greeted Ethan with respect. "Mr. Caldwell, your suite is ready. Ms. Blackwood has arrived and requested dinner with you." "Not tonight," Ethan cut him off, his hand unconsciously brushing against Aisha's back. A small gesture, but one that made her flinch. "We have other plans." The manager nodded, his gaze briefly flicking between them, and Aisha felt a little awkward. In the elevator up to their floor, their shoulders accidentally brushed, and Aisha felt his warmth. Her suite was larger than her apartment in Brooklyn, with windows overlooking the sparkling waters. But what caught her attention was the door connecting to Ethan's room. Heavy wood, with an antique brass handle, now closed but not locked. It felt like a symbol of possibilities neither of them had dared to explore. Ethan placed her bag down, his gaze scanning the room. "There's a small diner a few blocks away," he said, his voice slightly awkward. "They are not fancy, but they make great clam chowder. Do you want to have dinner? Just the two of us." Aisha smiled, feeling her heart race. "Like a date?" she asked, her voice teasing but her eyes serious. Ethan blushed, a rare display that made him look younger. I'm not sure. I've never really been on a date, honestly." He scratched the back of his neck awkwardly. "But I want to try with you." She nodded, feeling like she'd crossed an invisible boundary. "I've never been on one either. We can learn together." An hour later, they sat in a small diner by the water, with a simple wooden table, no tablecloth, just steaming bowls of clam chowder and warm sourdough bread. Aisha wore a blue dress and felt more comfortable in the business suit. Ethan had removed his blazer, his white shirt accentuating his gray eyes. They talked about little things, jazz, books, childhood memories. But then Aisha decided to ask the question she had been holding inside. "Ethan, have you ever felt afraid of wanting something that doesn't belong to your world?" she asked, looking down at her bowl of soup. "I mean, I grew up in Savannah, teaching kids to read and listening to jazz at the local cafe. But here, I'm seen as an outsider. A colleague once called me a diversity hire. It makes me wonder if I belong here." Ethan set his spoon down, his gaze serious. "I understand that feeling more than you think. I grew up with a father who wanted me to be a perfect version of him, but I was afraid of failure, scared of emotions because their marriage was a failure. I've never loved Aisha because I was worried I would hurt someone like my father broke my mother." His confession took Aisha by surprise. She reached across the table, lightly touching his hand. "You're not like your father, Ethan. I see you, not as the CEO, but as the guy playing the virtual piano and laughing when I tell stories about my grandmother." She smiled, but her eyes betrayed her fear. "But I'm scared that your world, with Claudia, with the board, will never accept me." Ethan took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. "I don't care what they think," he said, his voice firm. "You make me want to be myself, Aisha, and that's something I've never dared to want." That moment was interrupted when Ethan's phone buzzed. He checked it, and his face hardened. "Claudia," he said, his voice tight. "She wants to meet with me right now about the conference." He looked at Aisha, his eyes full of apology. "I have to go, but I want to continue this conversation. Is that okay?" Aisha nodded, though her heart felt heavy. "Okay, Ethan, but be careful. Claudia, she doesn't like me." She gave a weak smile, trying to hide her worry. Ethan stood up, his hand lingering on hers a second longer than necessary. "You don't need to worry about Claudia," he said, his voice low. "I'll be back." He left, leaving Aisha with her now cooling bowl of soup and the feeling that they were getting closer to something and a storm. The Washington State Convention Center in Seattle gleamed with lights and buzzed with thousands of tech innovators, from young startups to giants like Caldwell Innovations. Aisha Brooks stood in the wings of the main stage, clutching her tablet like a shield, her heart pounding as she prepared for Ethan Caldwell's speech. Today, He would announce the $15 billion merger with Blackwood Enterprises, a game-changer for the cloud data industry. But after last night's dinner, where they shared fears and dreams, Aisha wasn't sure she was ready to witness Ethan step into a future that might not include her. She looked out at the auditorium, where tech journalists clattered away on laptops, and members of the Caldwell Innovations Board sat in the front row, their expressions stern. Claudia Blackwood stood nearby, her bright red dress making her stand out like a flame in the crowd. She glanced at Aisha, her cold smile like a warning. Aisha gripped her tablet, remembering Nana Grace's words. "When they try to make you small, stand taller, my dear." But right now, she felt smaller than ever. The stage lights brightened, and Ethan stepped out, his dark gray suit hugging his frame, his sharp gray-blue eyes betraying a hint of unease that only Aisha could see. He held a cup of coffee, her recipe, with a hint of cinnamon she had left in his office this morning, a reminder of their genuine moments. He set the cup on this podium, looked at the audience, and began. "Good morning," he said, his deep voice resonating across the auditorium. "Today, you're here to hear about the future of Caldwell Innovations and a merger expected to transform the tech industry." He paused, his eyes sweeping over the crowd, then stopped on Aisha, who stood in the wing's shadows. At that moment, she felt like they were the only two people in the room. But Claudia stepped closer to Aisha, whispering in a smooth but sharp tone. "He'll do what needs to be done, you know. Ethan always chooses responsibility. That's how he was raised." She gripped Aisha's hand, her nails lightly digging into her skin. "You don't belong in this world, Aisha. Don't hurt yourself." Aisha pulled her hand away, her gaze steady. "She said you don't know him like you think you do," her voice low but certain. "And you can't tell me." She turned back toward the stage, her heart pounding, but determined not to let Claudia shake her. Ethan continued, his voice stronger. "But before discussing the merger, I want to tell you about my father, William Caldwell. He built this company from a garage in Silicon Valley, teaching me everything about business and legacy. But he never taught me about happiness, about what makes life worth living." He paused, his hand resting on the coffee cup, and Aisha knew he was thinking of her. The room fell silent, sensing the unusual shift. The board members began whispering, and Claudia clenched her fists, her gaze filled with worry. Ethan looked directly at Aisha, his eyes never leaving hers. 3 months ago, I met someone who made me question everything I thought I knew about success. Someone who reminded me that life isn't just about numbers or contracts, but about genuine moments, like a jazz song or a cup of coffee with a hint of cinnamon. The whispers in the auditorium grew louder. Claudia whispered something to a nearby assistant, but Aisha couldn't hear. She could only see Ethan breaking down the wall he had built his whole life. He said the merger with Blackwood Enterprises includes a marriage clause, his voice ringing out. My father believed a family alliance would protect the company. But he was wrong. I will not marry Claudia Blackwood, and I will not continue with this merger. The room exploded with whispers, cameras flashing rapidly. Claudia stepped toward the stage, her eyes burning with fury. "Ethan, stop!" she whispered harshly, but he ignored her. He stepped away from the podium and walked toward the wings where Aisha stood. "Aisha Brooks," he said, his voice soft, but still carrying through the microphone, filling the room. "The girl from Savannah taught me that true strength is about living true to your heart, even when it's scary." Aisha felt her heart stop. She shook her head, panicked, but Ethan extended his hand. "Come here," he said gently. "Please." Her feet moved before she could think, walking onto the stage under the blinding lights. When she stood before him, Ethan took her hand, their fingers intertwining, and the whole world seemed to disappear. He said, "I don't want a merger," looking directly into her eyes, allowing the audience to hear every word. "I don't want a marriage of convenience. I like mornings with jazz, stories about Savannah, and someone who sees me not just as a CEO. Aisha, I want you." Tears slid down Aisha's cheeks, but she smiled, squeezing his hand. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Are you sure? They won't forgive you." "Let them do what they want," he said, his voice unwavering. "I control the majority of the shares. But even if I didn't, I'd still choose you." He wiped away her tears, a gentle gesture that silenced the room, then erupted into applause, not from the board members, but from the young developers at the back, who believed in dreams more than contracts. Claudia stood at the podium, her eyes filled with rage. "This is business suicide," she shouted, but the applause drowned her out. She turned and whispered something to her assistant, and Aisha knew she wouldn't give up easily. But right now, she didn't care. All she saw was Ethan, who had just given up an empire to choose her. They stood there, hand in hand, under the stage lights. Aisha thought about Nana Grace and her grandmother's words. "When love comes, it won't ask you about banks or skin color. It just knows the heart." She squeezed Ethan's hand, feeling like she had just found a new home, not in Savannah or Manhattan, but beside him at this moment. Seattle woke under a gray sky, but inside the Olympic Hotel, the atmosphere was electric, like a storm brewing. Aisha Brooks sat on the bed in the luxurious suite, her phone buzzing constantly with notifications from social media. Ethan Caldwell's speech at the previous night's tech conference had gone viral worldwide, with headlines like "Billionaire CEO gives up empire for love and Caldwell cancels $15 billion merger, chooses assistant from Savannah." But not all the attention was positive. Some comments on X targeted her, calling her a gold digger or a failed diversity hire, alluding to her skin color and background. Aisha deleted the app, but those words pierced her heart like needles. She stood up and looked at the door connecting to Ethan's room. Still closed, but not locked. After leaving the conference last night, reporters surrounded them, and security had to escort them back to the hotel. Ethan had held her hand the entire way, but when they entered the elevator, he had fallen silent, his gaze full of conflict. He had said, "I needed time to process this," before leaving her at the door. Aisha understood. He had just given up a billion-dollar deal and challenged his father's legacy, but that silence made her wonder if he regretted it. The phone buzzed again. This time, it was Maya Chen, a fellow intern from Caldwell Innovations. "Aisha, are you okay?" Maya asked as soon as she picked up. "The whole world is talking about you and Ethan. I was downstairs and just saw Claudia Blackwood leave with a team of lawyers. What's going on?" Aisha sighed, sitting down on the sofa. "I'm not sure, Maya. Ethan. He did something I didn't expect. But now, I'm afraid I'm the reason everything is falling apart." She recounted the speech, how Ethan had called her up on stage, and the cruel comments she had read this morning. "I don't know if I'm strong enough to face all this." "Listen," Maya said, her voice steady. "You're the most intelligent person I've met at this company. The people online don't know you. They're just jealous. And Ethan? He's not the type to act on impulse. If he chose you, it's because he believes in it. Don't let Claudia or the media make you doubt yourself." Maya's words were like medicine, but Aisha still felt uneasy. She called Nana Grace, needing her voice to find balance again. "My dear, you're shaking up the world," Nana said, her voice full of pride. "I saw the news. That boy stood in front of the crowd to choose you. But I know you're scared. Tell me, what's making you anxious?" Aisha shared everything. The pressure from the media, Claudia, and the fear that she didn't belong in Ethan's world. "I love him, Grandma," she admitted, saying it aloud for the first time. "But I'm a black girl from Savannah. Can I live in his world without losing myself?" Nana laughed, her voice deep and warm like Sunday morning jazz. "Aisha, love doesn't ask you to give up who you are. It asks you to be stronger. You carry the strength of me, your mother, and all those who fought for you to stand here today. If this boy is worthy, he'll stand by you no matter what the world says." Nana's words comforted Aisha. She opened the window, letting the cool Seattle air flood in. She decided not to let the cruel comments define her. She was Aisha Brooks, the girl who earned a scholarship, built a community library, and made a billionaire see her heart. Meanwhile, in the hotel's private conference room, Ethan sat across from a group of lawyers and board members, his eyes sharp but tense. Claudia Blackwood stood at the head of the table, her voice as sharp as a knife. "Ethan, you've just destroyed our stock price. The board is considering suing you for breaching your fiduciary duty. And the media? They're tearing you apart for choosing an inexperienced assistant instead of a strategic alliance." Ethan looked straight at her, his hands clenched. "Claudia, I own the controlling shares. The board can't do anything unless I resign. And about Aisha, she's not just an assistant. She's the one who made me realize my father's legacy isn't everything." He stood up, his gaze sweeping over the room. "The merger is over. I won't marry you, and I won't let anyone force me to live a life I don't want." A board member, Mr. Romano, slammed his hand on the table. "You're throwing away everything William built. That girl, she doesn't understand our world. Do you think the media will let it go when a white CEO picks a black assistant from a small town? This is a scandal waiting to happen." Ethan gritted his teeth, angered by the way they spoke about Aisha. "She's stronger than anyone in this room. And if the media wants a scandal, let them have it. I won't change my decision." He left the room, leaving Claudia and the board members stunned. In Aisha's suite, she was organizing documents when she heard a knock at the door. She opened it to find Ethan standing there, his hair slightly disheveled, his eyes full of resolve. "Aisha," he said, his voice hoarse. "I need to talk." She invited him in, her heart racing. They sat on the sofa, the space between them filled with unspoken things. "I'm sorry for last night," he began. "I didn't want to leave you alone with all of this, but I needed time to face the board." Aisha nodded, her gaze soft. "I understand, Ethan. But are you sure? What you did last night will change everything. The media, the company, everything. And She paused, her voice trembling. "I saw the comments online. They say I'm not worthy, and the reason you're destroying the company." Ethan took her hand, their fingers tightly interwoven. "They're wrong, Aisha. You're the reason I'm finally living, not just existing. I've spent my whole life doing what my father wanted, but you've made me want something for myself." He looked into her eyes, his voice steady. "I love you, and I'll face anything. The media, the board, Claudia, to be with you." Tears slid down Aisha's cheeks, but she smiled. "I love you too," she whispered, the words finally spoken aloud. "But I'm scared, Ethan. Not because I don't want this, but because I don't want you to lose everything for me." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I'm not losing anything. I'm gaining everything. A real life with you." They sat in each other's arms, the sound of waves from Elliott Bay softly echoing like a gentle jazz tune. Aisha thought of Nana Grace, the black woman who had fought for her to stand here, loving someone despite all the barriers. She squeezed Ethan's hand, determined to face the challenges ahead. They didn't know that Claudia was already planning her counterattack, But right now, in this room, all they needed was each other. Two hearts that had found each other amidst the storm of the world. Morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Jazz and Pages, the newly opened bookstore and cafe in downtown Seattle. The small bell on the door rang softly, blending with the gentle jazz tune from the speakers. The Way You Look Tonight. Aisha Brooks stood behind the counter, her hair neatly braided, the pearl earrings from Nana Grace sparkling in the light. She wore a simple blue dress, her fingers adorned with a delicate diamond ring, a symbol of the vow she and Ethan Caldwell had exchanged 3 months ago in Nana's small garden in Savannah. The bookstore was Aisha's dream come true. Walnut bookshelves stacked with novels, poetry, and children's books, cozy reading corners with vintage armchairs, and a cafe counter serving Nana Grace's recipe, strong coffee with a touch of cinnamon for warmth. Today was the official opening, though they had already opened for a soft launch 2 weeks ago. The customers filled the space, flipping through books, sipping coffee, and whispering about the love story that had rocked the tech world. A billionaire CEO gave up his empire to open a bookstore with his assistant from Savannah. Ethan entered from the back, his white shirt sleeves rolled up, his tie loose. No longer the stiff Windsor knot of the full-time CEO days. He wrapped his arm around Aisha's waist, kissing her hair softly. "You're busy, Mrs. Caldwell," he teased, his warm tone making her smile. "Just trying to make sure everything is perfect for today, Mr. Caldwell," she replied, adjusting his tie. "Has Nana arrived yet? She said she would bring the pound cake recipe to teach the chef." Ethan glanced at his watch. "Her plane lands at noon. Maya is picking her up from the airport." He paused, his gaze briefly tense. "And the board meeting at 3 p.m. They still haven't given up on suing me." Aisha took his hand, feeling the tension in his fingers. The past year had been a legal and media storm. After Ethan's speech in Seattle, the Caldwell Innovations Board tried to overthrow him, accusing him of breaching his fiduciary duty by canceling the $15 billion merger with Blackwood Enterprises. The media was split. One half called him a romantic hero, while the other criticized him for being irresponsible, with some articles targeting Aisha, implying she was a disruptor or unsuitable because of her race and background. But Ethan, with controlling shares, had restructured the company, keeping the creative tech division, handing over the business side to the board, and using part of his assets to establish a fund supporting independent bookstores. "Are you okay?" Aisha asked, searching his eyes. "They can't take away what you've built." Ethan smiled, but the smile carried a hint of exhaustion. "I'm not worried about them. I'm concerned about what you must endure because of me." He touched her cheek, his fingers gentle. "The comments online. I know they hurt you." Aisha shook her head, placing her hand over his. "I'm stronger than that, Ethan. Nana taught me that the people who try to make you small are afraid of your light, and my light shines brighter than ever when I'm with you." She smiled, and he hugged her, not caring that customers were watching. The doorbell rang, and Maya Chen walked in, her hair now dyed purple, accompanied by Nana Grace. Nana wore a cream-colored sweater, holding a tin box containing her cake recipe. "Aisha, my dear," Nana called, her voice full of life. "This old lady's here to ensure my pound cake gets made right." She hugged Aisha, then turned to Ethan, her eyes mischievous. "And this young man had better treat my granddaughter well." Ethan laughed, bowing his head. "Always, Mrs. Grace. Thank you for coming." He hugged her, and Aisha's heart warmed as she saw the two most important people in her life harmonizing. Maya placed a stack of flyers on the counter, advertising the jazz performance for the evening. "Reporters are gathering out there," she reported. "They still call him the CEO who gave up his empire for love. And, Claudia sent her congratulations, but I bet she's not too happy." Aisha raised an eyebrow. After she failed in Seattle, Claudia Blackwood withdrew from the merger and shifted focus to a new project. She sent a brief email congratulating them on the opening, but Aisha knew it was a formality. "She doesn't matter anymore," Aisha said firmly. "We're building something real, something beyond any contract." Ethan left to join the board meeting via video call in the afternoon. Aisha stayed in the bookstore, serving customers and guiding the chef in making cakes according to Nana's recipe. As the evening sun cast a golden glow over the bookshelves, Ethan returned, his expression lighter. He said they agreed to the restructuring plan, pulling Aisha to a quiet corner. "I keep the creative division, and the bookstore fund will continue. We're free." Aisha hugged him, tears of happiness streaming down her face. "Free," she repeated, her voice trembling. "And we have a whole kingdom here." She pointed to the store, where customers were reading. Nana was singing Summertime with the jazz band, and Maya was taking pictures for social media. Ethan led her to the piano in the corner of the bookstore, a gift he had bought for the grand opening. He sat down, his fingers gliding over the keys, playing the opening notes of "The Way You Look Tonight." Aisha leaned on his shoulder, singing along, her voice blending with the melody. Customers stopped to listen, and Maya recorded a video, her eyes sparkling. "This is the moment," she whispered to Nana. "Their love is stronger than anything." As the song ended, Ethan pulled Aisha into his arms, whispering, "I used to think legacy was about what my father built. But this, you, this bookstore, us, is the real kingdom." He kissed her gently but specifically, and Aisha felt that all the challenges they faced, the media, the prejudice, the board, had been worth it. That evening, as the customers left, Aisha and Ethan stood in Jazz and Pages, hand in hand. Nana sang one more song, her voice bridging Savannah and Seattle. Aisha looked at Ethan, thinking about their journey, from the stuck elevator to the conference stage, from fears to love. They had built something not just a bookstore, but a home where everyone was welcome, regardless of background or skin color.